This is Austin with Onewheel Parts, and today I'm going to be showing you how to do a headlight repair. The tools needed are going to be a 3/32 Allen wrench, a flathead screwdriver, a Phillips head screwdriver, a heat gun or hair dryer, a pair of needle nose pliers, and a new set of controller gaskets. And as always, a link to all the products that you're going to need for this repair will be down in the description. If you're unsure on how to remove your controller from your board, check out our board disassembly video down in the description. To open up your controller, you're going to need to remove these 4 screws right here on the back. On the underside, there's going to be 5 screws. There's 1 in that little hole. There's going to be 2 on this left side of your controller. This is where we're going to be needing to use our 3/32 Allen key. And there's also going to be 2 on the other side right there. There's also going to be 5 Phillips head screws right here in front of the headlight. And there's also going to be 2 plastic rings that we're going to be removing on the back side as well. So let's start off by taking our Phillips head screwdriver and removing these 5 screws right in front of the headlight. Now that we got those taken out, we can take our 3/32 Allen key and go ahead and start removing these 5 screws on the back side of the controller. Also good to note, these screws can be kind of long, so just keep turning, I promise they'll come out. Alright, now we can begin removing the 4 screws on the back side of the controller here. This takes a Phillips head screwdriver as well. Sometimes these can be a little tight, so you will have to exert a little bit of pressure to get them to come out. Just be careful not to scrape the screw head. We can now begin to remove the plastic rings for one of the motor plugs and the foot pad sensor plugs. So all we need to do is really loosen these up with a pair of needle nose pliers since they're going to be screwed on a little bit tight. Don't go super crazy with force and start marring the plastic with the needle nose pliers. It doesn't take a lot of force to get these to come loose, and then we can just unscrew them the rest of the way by hand. Alright, now that we've gotten those loosened up with the needle nose pliers, we can just spin them right off. Also important to note, the yellow one goes towards the smaller plug and the black one goes towards the larger plug. Alright, now we can get into the fun part of opening up this controller. This is arguably going to be one of the hardest parts of a headlight repair, is getting into this thing. It's going to give you a lot of resistance. Just try and pry it open a little bit like a clamshell. Don't try and open it all the way at first. You could really damage something. You're going to need to heat up the plastic seals around these plugs for the motor and the battery to get those loosened up. So we can just go ahead, take our heat gun, blow dryer, hair dryer, whatever you have, and just heat those seals up a little bit. It doesn't take a super crazy amount of heat. Remember to always keep your heat gun moving. You don't want to actually melt the controller port for the plug. That's going to be very damaging to your controller. So once you get these heated up a little bit, you can really work it open a little bit more. And don't be afraid to put some force into this. It is going to take a lot of force to get these open. But once we've got it to around this point where we can see the exposed wires, we're going to need to unplug 3 things. One of them is going to be the charge port, one of them is going to be the actual headlight itself, and one of them is going to be your power button. If you see here, the headlight cable is actually damaged. It's a little bit crooked. It's not supposed to be like that. Yours might actually be fully unplugged. But we can just go ahead and start unplugging those 3. One of them is going to be right here at the top. Just go ahead, work it out a little bit. They do have little clamps that lock them in place, so you are going to have to squeeze those to get them out. Don't be afraid to reach your hands in there, but remember that this is a circuit board, so you don't want to go around knocking things loose and stuff like that. You just want to get in there, unplug it. I would not recommend sticking in metal objects or anything in there to get those unplugged. Just use your hands. Alright, now that we have everything unplugged, we can really start cracking this open. So what I find is easiest is if you see here, there's actually a bit of plastic stuck up under the metal that sort of keeps the housing locked in place. What I find is easiest is just pull it up and out underneath that little lip and work it loose. And once you've initially gotten that, just use a little bit of heat on those controller gaskets and stick a flathead screwdriver in there and just sort of pry along that top piece of plastic to get it to break away from those controller seals. Once we've broken it all loose, you can do the final pop and knock that baby open. If you see here, the controller seals are very sticky, very grippy, and it almost has a little cheese stretch here when I pull it apart. Once you've done that, the hardest part is over. Now we can go ahead and start repairing that headlight cable. So now that we've got the controller open, we can see why our headlight doesn't work or why it's been flickering. So in this particular case, the ferrite ring here on the stock XR headlight cable has actually pulled the plug off of the pins for the headlight cable receptor. So to fix this, all we have to do is very gently push it, straighten it out. Don't use too much force, we don't want to break those pins. And once you've got it straightened out, we can just push it right back down. Also good to note, if you wanted to replace your headlight cable with the shielded one that doesn't have the ferrite ring on it, that way it doesn't pull it loose in the future, you can go ahead and do that. We'll have a link for that down in the description. Alright, so now that we have repaired our headlight cable, we can go ahead and start putting our new controller gaskets on. All we need to do is remove any old adhesive, clean the surface off really well with alcohol, and go ahead and grab your new controller gaskets. Alright, so to install these, what we're going to do is peel one of the adhesive sides off. It is a double-sided adhesive, so just peel it off. Be careful not to stretch it when you're peeling the adhesive off in case that plastic liner sticks. So this part can be kind of tricky. What I find is easiest is to start with the top. Go ahead and just slowly push it on and inch it. Make sure the holes line up and the top is secure. And sort of pinch those down once you have them in a place that you'd like. And now the tricky part comes is with the bottom. A lot of the times that connector will try and stick to the adhesive part of that controller gasket, either on the metal or the plastic side of the plug. What I find is easiest is take a flathead screwdriver, push it down very slightly, making sure it doesn't curl or flip upwards or stretch out at all. You can also lift the connector up a little bit to give it a little bit more clearance. Alright, now that we've got both of those on there, we can go ahead and peel the other side of the adhesive off. So when putting this controller back on, we don't want to sandwich it onto those seals just yet. All we want to do is sort of line it up and get it sort of a reference point. So just line up the plugs for the battery and the motor and sort of just push it on there, but don't let it touch the actual adhesive for the controller gaskets. We still have to plug everything in before we fully sandwich it on there. So now we can go ahead and start plugging everything back in. Also good to note that a lot of people will go ahead and hot glue that ferrite ring down to the controller box right here so it doesn't knock it loose if you haven't replaced it with the shielded cable yet. Alright, now that we've got everything plugged in, we can go ahead and snap that back on to the controller, making seal with those gaskets, and seal it all up. Just go ahead around the side, make sure the screw holes are aligned, and just push it down where it seals flush, and we can start screwing everything back together. It's also good to note that if you have waterproofed your board, you will have to re-waterproof it after opening up the controller. So now we can just start with those 5 Phillip head screws and just screw them back on right in front of the headlight. It's important to note that there is a rubber ring that goes all around the top of that controller which seals the metal to the plastic. Be sure not to over tighten this to where that rubber ring is sticking out of the front of the metal. The bumper rubbing up against it can damage it and actually make your board less water resistant. Go ahead and screw it down to where it's flush or less than flush with the metal. That way the bumper doesn't scrape up against it and wear it down over time. Now we can go ahead and start screwing in the 3/32 hex screws. Just go ahead and screw those 5 in. Remember to screw the one in the hole down in the middle of the controller and you'll be all set. Alright, now we can go ahead and screw those 4 screws back at the back of the controller, as well as put on those hex rings. What I find is easiest is just go ahead and screw on the hex rings finger tight, and then tighten them later with needle nose pliers after we put those 4 Phillips head screws in. This is also where it was important to note which color ring goes next to which plug. The black one goes next to the larger plug for your battery, and the yellow one for the foot pad sensor goes next to the motor plug. So let's go ahead, just start screwing down these Phillips head screws. They can be kind of tricky if you didn't align your controller gasket seal with the hole to get in there, but I promise they will go back in. It's going to take quite a bit of effort to get them in sometimes though. Alright, now we can go ahead and start tightening these rings down. Again, it doesn't take a super high amount of pressure. Just very lightly go ahead and screw these down a little bit more with the needle nose pliers. That way they won't come loose. Usually takes maybe 3/4 to a full revolution with the needle nose pliers to get them to fully seat down. This has been Austin with Onewheel Parts. Remember to like, comment, subscribe, and as always, there will be a link down in the description for all the products needed for this repair. Be sure to check out onewheelparts.com for all your one-wheel accessory needs. And remember guys, float on!